Hey guys, Philosopher here, and today I've got my Stockwatch infographic, actually for the month of April 2022. It is May 1st now. I was on a business trip, so wasn't able to get this out earlier. Crazy enough, things have not changed in this last week, even though we've learned a little bit about the next patch. Gambit is coming out and so on. You know, as a practical matter, until we know what the Crucible rewards are and how much we want to invest there, things are very much up in the air in this game. I will tell you, it's been a little while since I've released this infographic, and the reason why is we know less than ever about the future of the game and where it's headed. Scopely doesn't tell us what the Scourge requirements are. They don't tell us, for example, which teams are going to be required, how strong we're going to need to make those teams for the next Horseman. And so as a practical matter, this game right now is all about saving resources so you can go all in on the teams you need for the next Horseman. That is kind of where things are at. But there's been a lot of changes, and I felt comfortable making the Stockwatch once we got through the Morgan Le Fay event and knew which teams were necessary there, and frankly, how the whole Darkhold team was. So one thing I will just say is really been trending up is the Web Warriors. And when they first came out, my take on them was, well, they're fantastic in bio raids. They're fine elsewhere. They're not like super amazing, but they're fine elsewhere. But they're great in raids. But you didn't need a huge investment for them to complete the current raids, right? You could complete Doom 2 difficulty 3 with them at Gear Tier 14. So that's where I was keeping mine at. As a practical matter, of the two teams, the Dark Hunters and Web Warriors, this was the team that you needed to have higher for the Morgan Le Fay Scourge, which is interesting. I would have expected Scopely to make it so you actually had to have a massive Dark Hunters because they'd want to screw us even more. So that was a good thing. Realistically, you need to have as big of a Web Warriors as you can, and then you can get by with a smaller Dark Hunter. So for almost everybody, other than 500 people who are going to be rerunning the Scourge event for Morgan Le Fay. And they did say, by the way, Scopely did say before Apocalypse comes that there will be another chance to run the Morgan Le Fay event. You're going to want to have big Web Warriors. And so in my mind, I think that makes this team very important, much more important than they were before. And I will just say, to give you a sense of things, I had originally had my Web Warriors at Gear Tier 14, and look at them now, right? Over 1 million unbuffed. I bought sixth Red Star on Miles and on Scarlet Spider to get them all at either 6 or 7. So I did that, and so I'm making the investment that I'm suggesting that you make here, which is do what you got to do on this event. This is really what you should be putting your resources into. So I think the smart move here is investing in Web Warriors, and so they're trending up. Another team that's interestingly trending up is Weapon X. And, I wouldn't have expected it because we already have an announcement of a new War Offense team in the next patch. And, Dark Hunters, of course, came out the prior patch, but Dark Hunters are way worse than Weapon X, way, way worse in War. And Weapon X is actually very helpful in the villain nodes in the Pestilence Scourge event. Now, we don't know for the next Scourge event whether there's going to be villain nodes or not. We don't know anything about them. They could, there could be all sorts of goofy nodes, hero tech and, whatever, mutant controller or, whatever kind of nodes they want to do. But at least for the Morgan Le Fay event, Weapon X were very important. Omega Red was important. Lady Deathstrike was super important on those nodes. Really, all the Weapon X could put in a lot of work in the villain nodes because there just aren't that many great villains compared to heroes. Particularly over the past year, some of the new superpower, post-power creep characters, if you look at them, right, who are the big villains here? Well, most people don't have Dormammu, and so it's really Omega Red and Doom, and some of the newer the Darkhold characters, some rework characters. But if you didn't already have your resources to bring your Darkhold up, Omega Red and the Weapon X team are important. And I will say they're even more important than before in Alliance War. Right now, there are Darkholds appearing a lot on defense. In addition to that, there are more and more people unlocking Dormammu, and Weapon X is really important for countering those both of those teams, in addition to, so they've even, in addition to, of course, countering massive Young Avenger teams if you're facing people who've, invested super heavily into those. So very interesting that Weapon X is surging and trending up, even though they've been out a while. Another character that's been out a while and is trending up is Dormammu. I think once Darkhold came out, a lot of people, myself included, were like, okay, so I've had Dormammu since whatever it was, December or January, but most people haven't, and they're literally power creeping Dormammu before he comes out, and most players get to actually use him. Well, it turns out actually Dormammu's better on the Darkhold team than Scarlet Witch by a pretty good margin. I mean, that's been holding for me on arena defense now for quite some time. I guess somebody finally beat me today. Actually, this is news to me as I'm making this video that somebody actually defeated me. But for the most part, the Dormammus are what is holding on my arena shard. And it's pretty hard for anyone to be able to beat that team. Similarly, on war defense, I'm seeing Dormammu with Darkhold being the best defense right now. So, he's also in the Pestilence Scourge event, super important as well. I mean, he is, we were looking at the villains a minute ago. He's by far the most important villain on the team. He is the character who in the villain nodes and in the cosmic nodes can kind of elevate all the rest of the characters and just make it a lot easier for you in that event. And I suspect that will be the case in future Scourges as well. If not this next one, the one afterwards. So still an important character to push for. All right, let's talk about trending downward. The Eternals. I mean, you have to say that, before this month, right? The Eternal, and before Morgan Le Fay and everything, and Agatha Harkness, the Eternals were sort of the best everywhere, right? They were the best in all game modes. You build up those two characters, and they were the best everywhere. That has changed. They're still very strong in raids. They're still very strong in Alliance War. So I don't want to suggest otherwise. Two Eternals plus some support characters can beat almost everything on War offense. In raids, I still use them in the Mystic nodes. Very strong team, but they're no longer the best, and they are hard countered by the Darkhold team, and so their viability in arena has gone down. It's still useful, but it's gone down, and they're no longer the top of the food chain. All right, so I think they're definitely trending down. Infinity Watch also trending down. In addition to the fact that now Darkhold is yet another team on top of them in the meta. Infinity Watch, you're starting to see, for example, the release of teams that will in other game modes counter them, right? Young Avengers counter Infinity Watch very well in other game modes. We're starting to see, teams in, let's say, Crucible that will counter them in other game modes. It's just they're an above average team. They're still good, but their time on the top of the meta was fairly short compared to a team like Black Order, which I think had predicted at the time, because just the sheer investment that you needed for them, since there was two old characters and it was not as high. So good team, but not where they once were. Shadowland is a team probably, I put them here third in this list because they're the least important of the three teams, but they're the team that's probably fallen off the most. Shadowland was a team that for a while it's like, wow, they beat almost everything. Even though they're a year old, they're still super top in the meta, and that's just not the case anymore. There's just a bunch of teams that they can't do anything against. They're already useless against, Young Avengers and Heroes for Hire. Now they're useless against the new Marauders team. So they're falling. Obviously, don't do anything against, let's say, an Infinity Watch that's on defense. They certainly do nothing against Darkhold, and they're not really very useful against Dormammu teams, although occasionally they can do a sacrifice or something like that. So as for practical matters, they're now sort of a mid-tier team that beats up on the mid to lower end teams. They can beat the new Warriors and so forth, but they're just not as relevant as they once were. And as I mentioned here, the addition of Darkhold really frees up, some of the better teams for war defense, which means that, Shadowland is out of luck. All right, new characters that came out from this last patch. Darkhold's clearly the best team in the game in nearly all game modes. Their cooldowns are too long for War and Dark Dimension. I mean, they're fine. I mean, Morgan Le Fay is actually really good in Legendary, from what I've been told. But some of the other characters, Wong can be pretty disappointing. Heartless can be disappointing. They just have long cooldowns and so on. But they're okay. I mean, I don't give you the wrong impression, but they're just not what people expected. But in Arena, in War, these are just, this is a super team and certainly the strongest overall team in the game. Morgan Le Fay is arguably the best character in the game. I think a good argument could be made as to whether or not Morgan is better or Dormammu. And I think, the fact that everybody that was able to get to a fairly, reasonable level in the event has her, even if it's just at 3 stars, means that basically everybody should be investing maximum in her. I mean, she is a plug and play character that can have real value with time warp and so forth. And obviously in the Darkhold team, she's necessary to elevate the team and bring the whole team together. Madeline Pryor, she's made the Marauders above average as a war defense team. She has some value outside of war, but not an important character outside of war in my opinion. She's useful, but she's not going to change things up for you in the mutant nodes of Doom or anything like that. But she's useful, and she certainly improves the Marauders team. She basically requires a team like Secret Avengers plus Kestrel to beat the new Marauders team. So that's significant. And this is a team that, at my level, was literally on the bench until now. The Marauders were. All right, investment advice. Red Star promos I've changed a lot on this list given the Darkhold shift. So I think you should just be saving all your gold promos for Darkhold right now. You can use them on Web Warriors like I did if you need to get a larger Morgan Le Fay. I do think Kestrel is a viable choice for 7 red stars. It depends on where you're at in the game. I try hard when I make these infographics to make them for all kinds of players. If you're a player just entering the Doom Raids, for example, Kestrel is really important because she carries you in the tech nodes, and she's still very important in the skill, used in 2 different sections. So, I don't regret at all the 7 red stars that I put on Kestrel, although obviously now it's less of a value proposition than it was, let's say, 6 months ago when I did it. But, you want to, the gold promos are looser now. You're getting more of them out of the game, but I do think you need to save some of them for the next Scourge event if you need to get a character bigger. You also, I think, need to, make sure you save some for, the next, meta team or whatever. But Darkhold is an arena team. It is the best team in the game. So, as far as I'm concerned, going hard on gold promos for that team is a no-brainer. So what I did with my top 10 red star upgrades is a little different than I've done in the past. So I usually in the past would not put a character on this list unless they already were available for upgrades. And that was sort of my hard rule because I felt like, it was confusing otherwise because I had a bunch of characters you couldn't upgrade yet. But given the Darkhold and how important they are, I felt like this infographic would get outdated in a hurry if I didn't include Darkhold. So I just put them on here. Wong, I think, is the most important to have large. I think there's an argument regarding whether or not you want Heartless or Agatha Harkness as the next one. I mean, some people have suggested to me that they think you can actually drop Heartless off the team. Some people are doing that, throwing in Emma or Loki to make their Morgan Le Fay go faster. I still think Heartless is really huge in the team and still helpful in the team. Certainly going to be helpful outside of Arena. And outside of arena offense, I would say. But even on arena defense, I mean, I keep Heartless. You could see others in my chart are doing the same. So I think, to me, Strange Heartless is a damage dealer. Harkness, as long as she lands her debuffs, is okay. So I'm more interested in upgrading him, but I could see an argument both ways. Wong is definitely more important than both, in my opinion. And then we have a pretty, drop down to teams that are no longer the best, right? Icarus, I still think is a very good upgrade because that team is fantastic. And the bigger he is, the more likely you are to get 2 hits on his ult. Kestrel, still important for the reasons I discussed earlier. Omega Red, we discussed earlier. Cersei, obviously with Icarus. And then I still think Deathpool, Captain Sam, and Dagger are important characters in raids that will continue to have value over a long period of time and have plug-and-play value and value outside their team. All right, for the first time, I'm talking about dark promos because now they've made that the thing for Horsemen. In my view, you should just be saving these for Horsemen at this point. I don't really see any point in upgrading Ultron or Ultimus. And Doom, I think, is a reasonable choice. I mean, particularly if you are, focused on raids. He's really good in tech raids. But, otherwise, I think that you should upgrade the characters to the point that you have them. In other words, Morgan Le Fay, if you have her at least 5 stars, you should be getting her to 5 red stars. If you don't, then I would just bring her to 4 for now and save your dark promos for other characters. All right, now let's talk about my general advice. I've been saying, by the way, this number one piece of advice I've had on here, and I'm keeping it on here because I think it's good advice. Ultimately, the focus that players should have is on Doomray 2 and Dark Dimension 5. The only players that should be focused primarily on other things are players who are done with Dark Dimension 5, in my view. I think Dark Dimension 5 not only gives you tons of gear that is really helpful elsewhere, but I do think Dormammu is, something that can really help, even for the Scourges, even if that is your focus. He was so helpful in the last Scourge. Yes, Web Warriors are super important. That dovetails in with Doomray 2 as well, but I think that ultimately getting through Dark Dimension 5 is still a very important goal. And then now I've changed number 2, and what I say here is hoard resources until the next Scourge event, unless you have enough resources to invest in all new teams. In other words, if you're some mega Kraken watching this, do whatever you're going to do, okay? But for those of us who are making choices and don't have unlimited everything, you cannot afford to bring up every new character. Scopely is getting to a point where, they are not only just introducing, like this next patch, I think there's 5 new characters. In addition to that, there's, always these reworks that come out with these new, teams. They said, for example, that the A-Force, there's 2 reworks. So then that brings us to 7. Then they said there's a whole new reworked team that they're going to tell us about. They're going to unveil. So that's another 5. So that's 12 characters you could be building for this upcoming patch. If you're doing that and you're just trying to keep up with everything, you're not going to be ready for the next Scourge. And the next Scourge may have a team that we don't expect be the top, team that you need to have. We don't know yet, right? So what I would say is for most players, upgrade characters when you need them. I'm not saying you shouldn't get through your raid lane or something like that, or, you should stop Dark Dimension, not stop working through that. But, other than what you absolutely need, save your resources, wait till we know exactly what you need for the next Scourge event, just like we did this time. I learned, as I was running it, hey, I need a big Web Warriors, and I had the resources to get it done. I think that is the only strategy left to us here. That's because Scopely has put us in a position where we just don't know what's coming next. All right, guys, if you like this video, smash that like button, subscribe to this channel. If you got comments, questions, cheers, jeers, happy, sad, angry, mad, you can put it below or go to my Discord. That's linked below. You can also go to my Twitch stream. That is linked below too.